A 34-year-old guy in Texas makes $94,000 a year. Nice apartment, leased SUV, decent watch, posts a vacation photo every few months. By every visible signal, he's doing fine, maybe better than fine. Then one Tuesday afternoon, he sits down, actually adds up what he owns, subtracts what he owes, and the number that comes back is negative $11,400. Not low, not needs work. Negative. He has officially built a life that is worth less than zero. And here's the part that should actually scare you. He is not the outlier in this story. He's closer to the median than the guy 2 doors down who feels like he's failing because he only has $4,000 saved. There is an invisible line running through American finances right now, a line at exactly $0, and a genuinely staggering number of people are living underneath it without having the faintest idea. They think broke means no money in the bank. It doesn't. Broke has a much colder, much more mathematical definition, and once you understand it, you'll never look at your own number the same way again. My name is Nick, and I've spent way too much time picking apart the numbers nobody wants to actually calculate for themselves. If you've ever felt weirdly uneasy about your own finances despite having a good job, and you couldn't quite explain why, stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly where you stand, and more importantly, exactly how to get off the wrong side of that line for good. Let's start with the definition, because this is where almost everyone gets confused, and the confusion
is doing real damage. Net worth is not your salary. It's not your bank balance. It's not how nice your car looks in the driveway. Net worth is one simple equation. Everything you own, added up, minus everything you owe, subtracted out. Your assets minus your liabilities. That's it. That's the whole formula. Cash, retirement accounts, home equity, car resale value, investments, that's the asset side. Mortgage balance, auto loan, student loans, credit card debt, that's the liability side. Subtract one from the other, and you get a single number that tells you with brutal honesty what your financial life actually adds up to. And here's the thing about that number. It can be negative. Most people have never even considered that possibility because nobody ever frames money that way. We're taught to think about income. How much did you make this year? We're taught to think about cash flow. Did you cover your bills this month? Nobody sits you down and says, if you sold everything you own today and paid off everything you owe, would you have anything left? Or would you actually owe somebody money? That question is the entire premise of this video, because the answer for an enormous chunk of this country is the second one. They owe money. Their existence, financially speaking, is in the red. So let's put a real number on enormous chunk. According to the Federal Reserve's household survey, the median net worth of an American household sits around $193,000. On the surface, that sounds reassuring. Surely if the midpoint is 6 figures, the people below it can't be that far underwater. Here's where the median lies to you by omission. A median only tells you the household exactly in the middle. It tells you nothing about how ugly things get as you walk down toward the bottom. And the picture down there is not a gentle decline toward a small positive number. For a meaningful share of younger households, single-income households, and households carrying education debt, the number doesn't stop at 0. It crosses straight through it and keeps going negative.
Let's make this concrete, because abstract statistics don't hit the same way a real ledger does. Picture 2 people, both 27 years old, both make $58,000 a year, almost to the dollar. Sarah and Marcus. Sarah went to a state school, got an academic scholarship that covered most of it, lived with 3 roommates for years, and drives a 2014 Civic she bought used and paid off 2 years ago. Marcus went to a private university, took out loans to cover what scholarships didn't, leased a newer car because the payment wasn't that much more, and carries a credit card balance he's been meaning to deal with since his last move. Sarah's net worth? Call it $14,000. Some savings, a paid-off car worth $9,000, and no major debt. Marcus's net worth? Negative $31,000. He has $38,000 in remaining student loans, a car that's worth less than what he owes on it, and a credit card balance sitting at $6,200, accumulating interest at over 20% annually. Same income, same age, same city. A $45,000 gap. Not because one works harder than the other, not because one is smarter, because they are standing on opposite sides of a financial line nobody taught them to look at. This is where most financial advice gets lazy. The polite version of this conversation would stop here and simply tell you to budget better. But that's not the whole story. Student debt is the single biggest manufacturer of negative net worth in America today. The scale of it is almost impossible to overstate. Total outstanding student loan debt has climbed past $1.8 trillion. More than 40 million Americans carry student loans. The average borrower owes over $38,000. Now, by itself, $38,000 doesn't sound world-ending. The problem is what it's stacked against. A 24-year-old graduate usually doesn't have meaningful assets yet. No home, no large investment account, no years of compounding. So they begin adult life all
$250,000 underwater before a single dollar of wealth has been built. And debt doesn't just cost you the amount you borrowed, it costs you the opportunities you lose while paying it back. Researchers have found that graduates carrying student debt often end up with dramatically lower net worth years later compared to similar graduates without debt. Not simply because of the loan itself, but because the loan delayed everything else: saving, investing, buying a home, building wealth. And student debt rarely travels alone. It usually arrives with roommates. Auto loans are the second pillar of this problem. Cars feel like assets because you can see them, touch them, drive them, use them every day. But financially, many vehicles become liabilities almost immediately. The moment a new car leaves the dealership, it can lose roughly 20% of its value, instantly. Your loan balance doesn't drop by 20%, only the car's value does. Which means for months or even years, many drivers owe more than the vehicle is worth. Financial professionals call this being upside down, a phrase that sounds harmless, but shouldn't. Because every dollar of that gap pushes your net worth lower, completely invisible from the driver's seat, completely visible on your balance sheet. Then there's the third pillar: credit card debt, the fastest growing financial
most households ever experience. Average credit card interest rates now sit above 20%. Think about that for a second. 20%. At those rates, debt doesn't just sit there, it grows quietly, aggressively, every month. If your payments aren't large enough, interest can consume a huge portion of what you're sending in, meaning progress feels impossible, and often is. A few $1,000s of credit card debt carried for years can cost more in interest than the original purchases ever did. Now stack all three together: student loans, auto loans, credit cards. That's exactly what millions of households are carrying simultaneously. They're employed, paying bills, showing up to work, functioning normally, yet their net worth remains negative. This creates a strange modern reality. People don't feel broke because they can still pay this month's bills, but financially, they're moving through life carrying a balance sheet that says otherwise. They're solvent month to month, but underwater overall. And those are two very different things. One is about surviving today. The other is about building tomorrow. The tragedy is that most people only monitor the first one. They ask, can I make this payment? Can I afford this monthly cost? Can I get approved? And most nobody asks them the hard question: what is this doing to my net worth? Because that's the question that determines what.
Here's the historical context that makes this even more important. Because this isn't some permanent feature of the economy. In fact, something strange happened recently. Between 2019 and 2022, median household net worth in America jumped by roughly 37%, the largest 3-year increase ever recorded by the Federal Reserve. On paper, that sounds like incredible news. And for many households, it was. Home values surged, stock markets climbed, savings increased during the pandemic. Asset owners saw their wealth grow dramatically. But here's the detail most headlines missed. The benefits weren't distributed evenly. If you already owned assets, you benefited enormously. If you owned a home, its value likely increased. If you owned investments, they probably appreciated. If you owned productive assets of almost any kind, the boom worked in your favor. But if you didn't own assets, if you were carrying debt instead, the story looked very different. Rising asset prices don't help people who don't own assets. A housing boom means very little when you're trying to save for a down payment. A stock market rally doesn't change much if you don't have investments. Which means the people already above the zero line often moved even further ahead, while many people below the line stayed where they were, or fell further behind. The gap widened. Not because everyone got
People had
poor,
wealth-producing
but because
assets,
some
and
people-
others didn't. This is one of the most important concepts in personal finance. The economy treats positive net worth and negative net worth as entirely different games. Above zero, time works for you. Markets work for you. Compounding works for you. Rising asset prices help you. Below zero, many of those same forces work against you. Interest compounds against you. Debt grows against you. Inflation consumes money you could otherwise save. And higher interest rates make borrowing even more expensive. Crossing from negative to positive net worth isn't just a numerical milestone. It's a phase change, like water becoming ice.
The same person, the same income, the same effort, but completely different financial physics. This explains why a person earning $90,000 can feel more stressed than someone earning $55,000. The higher earner may have larger debts, larger obligations, higher interest payments, a more expensive lifestyle supported by borrowed money, while the lower earner may have fewer liabilities and a positive net worth. Income and wealth are not the same thing, and confusing them creates a lot of unnecessary suffering. Now, let's talk about what being below the line actually feels like, because the psychological impact is just as important as the math. When your net worth is negative, every unexpected expense feels larger. An $800 car repair isn't simply annoying, it's a crisis, because there is no cushion.
No safety buffer, no reserve. The expense doesn't come out of savings. It usually gets added to debt, making the hole deeper. Researchers studying financial stress have found that ongoing money pressure creates measurable cognitive strain. The effect can resemble the mental fog associated with chronic sleep deprivation. In other words, part of your brain is constantly occupied, always calculating, always worrying, always anticipating the next financial problem, even when you're trying not to think about money. Imagine making career decisions under that pressure, relationship decisions, parenting decisions, health decisions. Every major choice gets filtered through financial stress, and that's where the trap becomes dangerous. Negative net worth quietly removes options from your life. You may stay in a job you dislike because you can't afford the risk of leaving. You may pass on a better opportunity because relocation costs money. You may avoid starting a business because failure would make existing debt worse. You may delay education, travel, family plans, or personal goals because the margin for error is too small. People often think wealth creates freedom, but what's more accurate is that debt removes freedom. The less flexibility you have financially, the fewer choices you can realistically make. And often the restriction happens so gradually that you don't notice it until years later. There's also a generational component to this problem. Housing costs have risen dramatically. Home ownership remains one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to ordinary households. Yet buying a home requires far more income relative to price than it did decades ago. For previous generations, simply remaining employed and making steady payments often resulted in growing equity over time. Today, that climb is steeper, which means building positive net worth increasingly requires deliberate action. It doesn't happen automatically for as many people as it once did. That doesn't mean success is impossible, it means awareness matters more than ever.
Because when the tailwinds weaken, strategy becomes more important. Now let's look at a case that breaks one of the biggest myths surrounding net worth. The myth that this is only a young person's problem. Many people assume negative or weak net worth is something you naturally outgrow with age, that eventually income rises, debts shrink, and everything sorts itself out. Sometimes that's true, but not always. Meet Diane. She's 51 years old, a regional sales manager, married, 2 mostly grown children, household income around $112,000 per year. From the outside, Diane looks financially successful. Stable career, stable marriage, a home in a decent suburb, no major financial disaster, no bankruptcy, no foreclosure, nothing dramatic. But let's look at her actual numbers. Her home is worth approximately $410,000. Sounds impressive. The remaining mortgage balance is around $375,000. That leaves roughly $45,000 in equity. Her retirement account contains about $61,000, much lower than many people would expect after 2 decades of work, partly because she paused contributions during difficult periods, partly because she once took a hardship withdrawal. There's also a home equity loan balance of $14,000, taken out to help cover education.
Retirement account contains about $61,000, much lower than many people would expect after 2 decades of work, partly because she paused contributions during difficult periods, partly because she once took a hardship withdrawal. There's also a home equity loan balance of $14,000, taken out to help cover educational expenses. She carries around $9,000 in credit card debt, a balance that has lingered for years. Her vehicle is worth about $16,000, but she still owes roughly $19,000 on the loan, meaning she's upside down by $3,000. Now add everything together. Home equity, retirement savings, minus outstanding debts, minus credit cards, minus vehicle loan imbalance. Her net worth remains positive, but only around $70,000. On paper, that doesn't sound terrible, but compared with where many households in their 50s typically stand, it's surprisingly low. And that's what makes Diane's story important. She didn't experience one catastrophic event. She experienced dozens of small leaks. A hardship withdrawal here, a tuition loan there, a credit card balance that never fully disappeared. Small decisions, reasonable decisions, defensible decisions. But over 20 years, those decisions quietly consume the compounding that should have been happening in the background. This is a version of financial struggle people rarely discuss because it doesn't look dramatic. Nobody sees it. Nobody talks about it. There is no headline moment, no obvious crisis, just decades of slow erosion. And that's what makes Diane's story more common than the extreme stories we hear about. The $0 line doesn't only affect people in their 20s carrying student loans. It can affect people in their 40s, their 50s, even their 60s. People who appear financially stable from the outside. People who genuinely believe you're doing fine until they finally calculate the number. There's also another reason comparisons can be misleading. Where you live matters enormously. Net worth varies dramatically from state to state. A household living in an expensive housing market may have far more home equity than a household earning the same income elsewhere.
Property appreciation alone can create massive differences. This means comparing yourself directly to a national average isn't always useful. Local economics matter. Housing costs matter. Income levels matter. The opportunities available in your specific market matter. Context matters. There's also a demographic layer that deserves honest discussion. Net worth differences across education levels, racial groups, and homeownership status remain substantial. Households led by college graduates typically have significantly higher median net worth. Homeowners generally have much higher net worth than renters. Families with access to generational financial support often avoid high-interest debt during emergencies. Families without those resources may have no choice but to rely on credit cards or loans. Acknowledging these realities isn't about assigning blame. It's about recognizing that people start from different positions. Some people begin the climb with advantages. Others begin with obstacles. But regardless of where you start, the math still works the same way. The principles remain unchanged. The path may be steeper, the journey may take longer, but the formula does not care where you began. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question. Are you above the line or below it? Not your salary, not your job title, not the image you present online, not the car in your driveway, not the neighborhood you live in. The actual number. Everything you own minus everything you owe. If you've never calculated it before, there's a good chance you've been avoiding it. Not intentionally, but subconsciously. The same way people avoid stepping on a scale when they're afraid of what it might say. Because uncertainty feels safer than confirmation. Yet avoiding the number doesn't change the number. It only delays your ability to improve it. So here's what I want you to do. Take out a piece of paper. Open a spreadsheet.
Use the Notes app on your phone. List every asset you have. Checking accounts, savings accounts, retirement accounts, investment accounts, vehicles, anything with legitimate resale value. Add those numbers together. That's your asset side. Now, list every liability. Credit cards, student loans, car loans, personal loans, mortgages, buy now, pay later balances. Everything. Add those together. That's your liability side. Subtract liabilities from assets. The result is your net worth. Not your perceived financial position. Not your social status. Not your income. Your actual financial position. The honest number. If that number came back negative, I need you to hear something important. A negative net worth is not a moral failing. It is not proof that you're irresponsible. It is not proof that you're bad with money. And it certainly isn't proof that you're somehow less capable than someone with a positive number. In many cases, a negative net worth is simply the result of following the path you were told to follow. Go to college, take out the loans, buy the car you need to get to work, use credit when necessary, build a life. For millions of people, those decisions were presented as responsible choices. The problem is that nobody explained how those choices would interact mathematically over time. Nobody showed the full ledger. Nobody explained the long-term consequences. The line at zero is not a judgment, it's a measurement. And measurements can change. That's the important part. Once you know the number, you can begin improving it. So let's talk about how. The first step is understanding that not all debt is equally dangerous. People often treat every debt as the same problem, but that's not how the math works. A mortgage at a reasonable fixed interest rate is very different from a credit card charging 22%. One moves slowly, the other spreads like a fire. If you're below the line, rank every debt you have by interest rate, highest to lowest. Ignore emotions. Ignore which balance feels more annoying. Ignore which lender sends the most letters. Focus on mathematics. The debt charging the highest interest is usually doing the most damage. Every month it survives, it continues working against you. Which means every extra dollar available should generally attack the most expensive debt first. The second step is stopping the bleeding. This sounds obvious, but it's where many people fail. Trying to pay off debt while simultaneously creating new debt is like filling a bathtub with the drain open. Progress becomes almost invisible. Before optimizing anything else, figure out exactly where new debt is entering your life. Are credit card balances growing? Are financing plans increasing? Are monthly obligations expanding? Identify the leak, then stop it. Because no recovery plan works if new liabilities keep appearing. The third step is building what I call a dignity fund. Not a luxury fund, not a vacation fund, not a reward fund. A dignity fund, a small emergency reserve. Even $1,000 can make a significant difference. Why? Because emergencies are inevitable. Cars break, appliances fail, medical bills happen, life happens. Without cash reserves, every unexpected expense becomes new debt. And every new debt pushes net worth lower. A small emergency cushion interrupts that cycle. Research consistently shows that even modest savings dramatically improve financial well-being. Not because the amount itself is life-changing, but because it provides breathing room, options, psychological relief, a chance to
A chance to solve problems without immediately reaching for a credit card.
The fourth step is where real progress begins. Once new debt has stopped accumulating and a small emergency fund exists, every extra dollar should be directed toward improving the balance sheet, reducing liabilities, increasing assets, closing the gap. This part is boring. There is no excitement, no viral success story, no overnight transformation, no secret trick, just consistency, month after month, year after year. But here's what people underestimate. Crossing from negative net worth to positive net worth is one of the most important financial milestones that exists. More important than a luxury car, more important than a six-figure salary, more important than looking successful. Because until you're above zero, your money is largely working against you. Interest is taking more than compounding can give. Once you cross above zero, the game changes. Now investments can grow, savings can compound, assets can begin pulling their weight. Time starts helping instead of hurting. The fifth step is the one people resist most, because it requires challenging social expectations. You may need to rethink what keeping up actually means. Many financial mistakes don't feel irresponsible when they're made. They feel reasonable. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer vehicle, a slightly larger loan, a slightly bigger lifestyle. Individually, each choice seems harmless, but wealth is rarely destroyed by one giant mistake. It's often destroyed by hundreds of small decisions moving in the same direction. From this point forward, every major financial decision should pass through one filter. Will this move my net worth up, down, or sideways? Not can I afford the monthly payment, not do other people my age have this, not will this make me look successful. Just one question. What does this do to my net worth? That single question eliminates an enormous amount of financial confusion because it forces reality into the conversation. A purchase that feels affordable can still be damaging. A loan that seems manageable can still reduce future flexibility. The goal isn't to stop spending money. The goal is to understand the true cost of every major decision. Because the households that eventually build wealth aren't necessarily smarter. They simply become better at asking this question repeatedly over long periods of time. Let me leave you with one final idea. It may be the most important point in this entire video. For decades, we've been taught to focus on income. People ask about your salary. They ask about your job title. They ask what car you drive. They ask where you live. Almost nobody asks about your net worth. Income is loud. Net worth is quiet. Income is visible. Net worth is invisible. And that's exactly why so many people track the wrong number. A person can earn a six-figure salary, yet still have a negative net worth. A person can earn a modest income, yet steadily build wealth over time. Because income and wealth are not the same thing. Income is what comes in. Net worth is what remains. Think about social media for a moment. People post vacations. People post new cars. People post luxury purchases. People post promotions. Nobody posts their balance sheet. Nobody shares their debt totals. Nobody announces their actual net worth. That's why appearances can be so misleading. Many people look wealthy, but financially they're underwater. Others look ordinary, yet their financial foundation is incredibly strong. The problem is that net worth is private. There is no social feedback, no scoreboard, no public ranking, no reminder that you're drifting in the wrong direction. So people keep optimizing for appearances instead of optimizing for financial reality.
Let me leave you with one final idea. It may be the most important point in this entire video.
For decades, we've been taught to focus on income. People ask about your salary. They ask about your job title. They ask what car you drive. They ask where you live. Almost nobody asks about your net worth. Income is loud. Net worth is quiet. Income is visible. Net worth is invisible. And that's exactly why so many people track the wrong number. A person can earn a six-figure salary, yet still have a negative net worth. A person can earn a modest income, yet steadily build wealth over time. Because income and wealth are not the same thing. Income is what comes in. Net worth is what remains. Think about social media for a moment. People post vacations, people post new cars, people post luxury purchases, people post promotions. Nobody posts their balance sheet. Nobody shares their debt totals. Nobody announces their actual net worth. That's why appearances can be so misleading. Many people look wealthy, but financially, they're underwater. Others look ordinary, yet their financial foundation is incredibly strong. The problem is that net worth is private. There is no social feedback, no scoreboard, no public ranking, no reminder that you're drifting in the wrong direction. So people keep optimizing for appearances instead of optimizing for financial reality. Imagine if net worth were visible. Imagine if people compare net worth the way they compare salaries. The conversation around money would look complete.
Imagine if net worth were visible. Imagine if people compared net worth the way they compare salaries. The conversation around money would look completely different. People might care less about impressing others and more about reducing debt. They might focus less on monthly payments and more on long-term ownership. They might think less about looking rich and more about becoming financially secure. The man from the beginning of this video is the perfect example. He earned $94,000 per year. He had a nice apartment, a leased SUV, a decent watch, vacation photos, all the visible signs of success. But his actual net worth was negative $11,400. From the outside, he looked like he was winning. On paper, he was below zero. That's the gap this video is really about. The gap between appearance and reality. The gap between income and wealth.
The gap between looking successful and actually being financially healthy. If your number came back negative today, don't panic and don't feel ashamed. A number is not a judgment. It's information, nothing more. The important thing is knowing where you stand, because you can't improve a number you refuse to measure. The moment you calculate it, you gain clarity, and clarity creates options. From that point forward, the goal is simple. Reduce high-interest debt, build a small emergency fund, avoid adding new liabilities, make decisions that improve your balance sheet, and keep moving forward. Slowly, consistently, month by month, year by year. Because wealth is rarely built overnight. It's built through repetition, through patience, through small decisions made correctly over long periods of time. The goal isn't becoming rich tomorrow. The goal is crossing the zero line, then staying above it, then continuing to build. That's the entire game. Know your number, track your number, improve your number. Everything else comes after that.
And once you start focusing on the right number, your financial future becomes much easier to understand. Quick honesty check before you go. I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing in this video is financial advice. These are simply patterns and public data. Take what's useful, leave what isn't. And most importantly, go do your own math.